This video was taken from a chapter in my novel entitled The Snapdragon Code by Jude Dupert-Duville. If you're intrigued, you can find it on Amazon Books. Stan was back in the city and it was late Friday afternoon. Whenever Stan was here in the city on Fridays, the halls leading to the building's west side lobby were blocked off after 5 p.m. and the ornate glass and brass lobby doors were locked, both for incoming and outgoing pedestrian traffic. Stan wanted that space for himself at that time of day, for a reason, and he never told anyone why. Since Stan owned this Art Deco landmark, his orders were followed without question. The fan-shaped brass lanterns that usually lit the expansive hallway were turned off at that time as well. Only one Dragonfly Tiffany lamp sat dimly lit on a console table that was placed midway down the hall. An open bottle of the Chateau's Burgundy and his favorite deep blue crystal wine glass had already been placed, on the top of its dark blue mirrored surface. When Stan Lufer was certain no one was down in the lobby, and he always checked the cameras first, he would drop down in his personal elevator and walk over to the sitting area. There, to the right of and to the left of the Art Deco side cabinet, were two comfortable maroon leather club chairs facing the West End lobby doors. It was here, on Friday nights in the city, that he would spend hours alone, watching the people walking by. This part of the building was quiet now, with only the hum of the air handlers keeping the area cool from the permeating sunlight. He could see the many people passing by outside while carrying their late afternoon shadows with them. Today the weather was warm for early May, bringing more people out than usual. After taking a few sips of his wine, Stan tops off his glass with a little more of the blood-red liquid and then walks toward the elaborate iron and brass doors that framed the actual lobby entrance. He reminds himself that this is the perfect place to carry out his voyeuristic encounters without being noticed. With nervous anticipation, he passes his hands through his short greying hair, as though he was preparing to greet guests. Sadly, however, that would not be the case. These one-sided meetings never ended up with any friendships. Anyone seeing him from afar would think he looked like a victim eyeing suspects through a one-way mirror. Inevitably, he always felt the tourists were the guilty ones because so many of them had refused to follow him during the revolt. As he reaches the massive glass doors leading out to the antechamber, he opens one of them wide and looks around, just to make certain no one is there. On either side of this enclosed area are 10-foot-long sapphire blue planters, filled with tall, leafy plants that provide Stan with the perfect cover just feet from the pedestrian traffic. At this time of day, the sunlight-filled part of that foyer make the black and gold-flecked terrazzo floors sparkle, giving it a luxurious, formal look. Stan now carefully positions himself behind the plantings in order to remain hidden from the passers-by. Today, Stan's study of human nature begins with the observation of an older couple coming up the avenue. They appear to be tourists. Both of them are looking up in awe at the various points of interest along the way. What could he see on their faces? Were there any signs of malaise? Did they look unhappy? Or was this day the highlight of their short lives, he wondered? Stan always wondered how any human could even get through the day knowing that he or she was going to die. How could they face each day knowing that at some point there would no longer be the other? How, even for a moment, could they be content knowing what fate awaited them? These tourists had no idea that people, even humanoids, go on after death. How could they even know that their society had already conquered death eons ago? Yet amazingly, this couple still seemed, well, happy. Stan could not comprehend it, nor could he forgive his own council for forcing people to be born into a life they truly believed would end in death. These were the things Stan wondered about when he was alone in the lobby of his building. He wondered whether he himself would have the courage to face life, thinking death was inevitable. When Stan returned to his seat, he started thinking about how clever he had been in finding a way out for himself and his people. My followers should get down on their knees and thank me for what I've done for them. I saved them from a fate worse than death, being born human. Damn it, the council's decision to order everyone to undergo empathy training was one thing. To mandate that everyone be reborn into Earth's brutal heaven was another. Going from paradise to purgatory was just too cruel of a punishment, and in the end, what were we all supposed to learn from it? Suffering and heartache. How was this going to help anyone? What we did to the androids after the upgrades was wrong. I realized that. Making them our equals was also wrong. I spoke out against it from the beginning. I voted against it. I begged them during council sessions not to go ahead with the upgrades, but they wouldn't listen. Now it turns out we are the ones considered the aberrants. If they had only given us the choice to keep the holographic avatars or even the cybernetic robots, the question of morality would not have come into play. I suppose it was inevitable that things would get out of hand when using the humanoids for sport entertainment. Our games had always been based on violent competition, going back to the original primitive video games of the previous millenniums. Let's face it, violence had become our main form of competitive entertainment, along with sexual amusement, of course. What else did we have in order to cope with the boredom? As the minutes pass by and the sun begins to set, Stan continues to watch the parade of tourists and corporates while he drinks his wine and wishes things had turned out differently. Then in the distance he notices someone with a very familiar gait coming down the sidewalk towards his bunker. As she gets closer, Stan can clearly see her blue eyeshadow and black liner, giving her the look of an Egyptian queen instead of a New Yorker. Then, when she's just feet away from her mesmerized voyeur, Stan spots the gold and lapis earrings. Those look like the ones I gave her. It's got to be Patra. It looks just like her, he tells himself, seeing the same straight dark hair and same beautiful face. Jetrel must have written her into the program like I asked. The closer she came, the more Stan thought it must be her. If I had the damned courage, I would go out right now and talk to her. What would she do, he wondered. Maybe I should follow her. At that moment, and without thinking about the door locking behind him, Stan bursts out the door and starts following closely behind her.
Patra! Patra!
The woman with the dark brown hair and blue eyes turns around to see who is calling. Immediately, Stan asks the woman,
Do you remember me?
No! Who are you?
Oh, I'm sorry. You look like someone I once knew. I thought for a minute you were her.
Stan says as the resemblance to Patra begins to fade the closer he was to her.
That's okay, I get that a lot.
She answers and then continues walking away. Crestfallen that this woman was not his queen, Stan now realizes he's outside, in the middle of a busy sidewalk, and the side lobby doors are locked. I'll have to go around to the main entrance to get in, he tells himself, now fearful of the trek without his bodyguards. The area is full of people and sounds he's not used to navigating alone. He begins to head around the corner and makes it all the way to the main entrance, but by now he is sweating and out of breath.
Mr. Rothmann, it's so nice to see you back in town. Is everything okay?
Stan replies that all is well and then quickly makes his way back to the West Wing lobby where he sits down to catch his breath. What the hell just happened? He asks himself. What was I thinking? If Jetrel had programmed Patra into this heaven, I'm sure I would have seen her by now.
I'm losing it.
It's the pressure I'm under, he tells himself, as he wipes his forehead with his sleeve and then gulps down more wine. I will never do that again.
What a damned idiot.
Stan calls himself and slowly begins to relax. After a while, Stan decides it's time to end his surveillance of the nameless trekkers, but then for some reason thinks better of it. Maybe she'll walk back this way later on, he considers. I'd just like to see her again. She looks so much like Patra. I wonder if she works in the area. If she comes by again, I'll take her picture and maybe I can find out who she is. Stan is now feeling the wine and the pent-up anger over his lonely situation. If things had just been left alone the way they were, none of this would have happened. We would not be considered murderers and perverts needing rehabilitation, and I would still have Patra. Not willing to leave his post right away and the possible chance to see the anonymous woman again, Stan pours the last of the bottle of wine into his glass and remains steadfast for another hour. Unfortunately, Patra's double never did come back his way, leaving him sad and full of memories. The people who know me, Stan reflects, would never believe that I had stepped outside without protection. I've never done anything like that. Since I've been in the city, I felt vulnerable and at the same time wonderfully anonymous. That's what freedom really means, to be able to go somewhere and not have anyone recognize you or even care who you are. Today is the first time I felt that. Do I have the nerve to try it again? I don't know yet. However, if I do see that woman again, I just might. Stan took his glass and wine bottle and went up to his penthouse apartment on the 66th floor. It was about 6 p.m. and he wanted some time to relax before dinner. Bentley usually has dinner ready by 7 p.m, so I still have some time to unwind on the outside deck. Stan tells himself as the elevator door opens onto a pure white expanse of very high wainscoted walls, intricate crown moldings around the ceilings, and several large crystal chandeliers hanging in the foyer area and all the way down the hallway. The Art Deco-style furniture in Stan's place harmonized perfectly with the design of the building. Everything was perfectly chosen for him, by an intelligence no longer reliant on the people it served. Large squares of polished black and white marble, just about everywhere the eye could see, looked strikingly modern, yet had an old-world elegance. The only hints of color were the bands of gold leaf trimming around the ceiling medallions and along the crown moldings. As Stan went down the hall towards the main living area, he called out to Bentley to let him know that he would be out on the rooftop deck. Shortly afterwards, the maid brought out shrimp cocktail the way Stan liked it, with homemade horseradish added to the sauce. Stan had carried his empty wine bottle in and decided he wanted another. The maid did not have to be told to retrieve another. The next bottle of red came back chilled and opened and ready for him. There was nothing like a warm spring evening in New York City, especially if you are hundreds of feet up above the ground and watching the sunset from an eagle's perch. By the end of the day, the steel and stone skyscrapers give off their stored heat by sending up warm breezes. Thankfully, the traffic below can barely be heard this high up. You are far enough from hell and close enough to heaven to forget you are still on earth. That's why Stan loved it here. This was Stan's last night of peace, before he faced off with the men who choose to call themselves the Enlightened Ones. I've handled them many times before, and I'll handle them tomorrow. Besides, they've grown weak and lazy lately. There's not one of them that trusts the other, and so I'll play them off against each other. They'll want a trip down memory lane, but I won't give it to them until after the conference. They will have to be real good if they want to have some time in the cellar. Without a doubt, Stan's enemies will be waiting at the gates tomorrow, but tonight will be his opportunity to plan their defeat.